Lehela, go beyond the Moshav band, working our way through their Shabbat Volume 1 album. A good vach to you, my holy sisters and brothers. That's Yiddish for Shavua Tov, which is Hebrew for a good week. Let's light up the darkness. New wisdom candle today. Who is with us as we get together to kick off a big week with some beautiful learning? I say a big week because Monday night is Rosh Hashanah. Wow, wow, wow. As we begin a week, so we begin a year. What a great way to begin it with some beautiful Torah learning on a Saturday night. Who is with us? Sharon. Shavua Tov from Lebanon, New Jersey. Kevin from Israel. Great to have you with us, Kevin. Guy in Ohio. Leah in LA. Paul in the Great Northwest. Zach in Washington. Paula. Shalom, a beautiful Saturday night. PK in Colorado. Pauline in Arkansas. Christo. A good vach and a good yar. That's what we say. A good yar or a good gebenched yar. You should have a good year, a good blessed year. And Christo adds, if I've wronged any of you in any way, please reach out to me and let me know how I can make things right. Beautiful. Christo is involved in that work of teshuvah, of atonement, and we have to reach out to the people that we've wronged. And if we don't know if we've wronged them, then we want to know so that we can properly apologize and make amends if possible. Gwen saying howdy from Michigan. Andres in Chicago. Zach saying it's his daughter Olivia's first Rosh Hashanah, beautiful, and may she grow to a life of Torah, chuppah, and masim tovim. Life of Torah, a Jewish marriage, and good deeds. Let me cue up the YouTube side. Give me a moment. Refresh. There it is. Very good. And Gigi with us from British Columbia on the YouTube side. All right, before we get into our learning, which is a great daf, we're in page 4 of the 8th volume of the Talmud. This is tractate Beitzah, and these are the laws common to all festivals. But a word first about Rosh Hashanah. It begins Monday night. 2 quick thoughts. One from our Rav, Yekusiel Kalmanson here in LA, and he shared that last week's Torah portion that we read this morning in Shul, Netzavim, he says it's no coincidence that it always comes before Rosh Hashanah. The Torah portion begins. All of you are standing before the Lord today. Moses is talking. He's going to continue talking in this week's Torah portion, Vayelech. Moses is giving his, final words of teaching to the Jewish people, to the children of Israel assembled right outside the promised land. His health and strength are not diminished in any way, and it's his birthday. He's 120 years old, and he's giving them the final words of law, advice, encouragement as they're about to enter. And one thing that Moses says specifically is, you're all standing here today, and then he names them sort of by categories and professions, from the priest all the way to the water carriers and wood choppers. So Rav Yekusiel says, why does he mention that? What we do, our professions, in addition to the fact that we're human beings, that we're sons and fathers, daughters and sisters, that we have an identity as Jews, and also our sort of position in the world, our professions, what we're doing. And it's to remind us that we want to bring everything what we are into the service of God. Right now, we're in a time we're examining our deeds, the final days before Rosh Hashanah, and then we'll enter the days of awe, the days of atonement between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And we're certainly going to be contrite about all the transgressions that we allowed ourselves to do in the past year. But we should also remember the things we did right. We should remember the ways in which we were of service to God and to our fellow human beings, and resolve not only to change the things we did wrong, but to repeat and even emphasize and strengthen the things that we did right. As my friend Alan Brody likes to say, Why do we say Shana Tova, right? A good year. Shana, the Hebrew word Shana means year. But Alan says that shares the same root with two very similar and related words. One is a word we're very familiar with here at Accidental Talmud, on the AT Daily Show, Mishna. Right, so the Mishna, we're always learning about the Mishna that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi compiled. These were the Mishnas that were taught, the sort of original written down code of the oral law. But the word itself, Mishna, means repetition, right? It means Mishna because it was an oral teaching that was repeated and repeated so that it would be memorized. But this word also is related to the word shinui, which means change. So repetition, change, they seem to be direct opposites. How do we reconcile these two associated meanings with the word shana, year? Says my friend Alan, what are we trying to do? We're trying to repeat the things that we did well and change the things that need changing. And if we resolve to do that and make some progress in these first days of the year, we're going to set a pattern for the rest of the year, and then indeed it will be a Shana Tova, a good year. A final thought about Rosh Hashanah from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who said that what is the main theme of Rosh Hashanah? I mean, we're entering the days of atonement and we want to be atoning, examining our deeds, etc. But the actual theme of Rosh Hashanah is the kingship, the sovereignty of God over the world and over all our lives. Now, when you're crowning a king, what you're really doing is subjugating all of your will and your desires to the king. But another important and very important thing that we do on Rosh Hashanah is plead for our needs to be fulfilled in the coming year. If we're sick, that we should get better. If we're making a living, that we should continue to make a living and even have a greater livelihood and have more prosperity. It's absolutely okay to pray for those things. If you've got a big family that's bursting the seams of your home, you should pray that you can move into a bigger home. Why should we be praying for our material needs at the same time that we're crowning our king and really saying our needs don't matter? We want to subjugate our will to your will. And the reason is because it's a package. It's a package. We were sent into this world. We are souls from the world of souls, but we were sent into this world on a mission and placed in a body. And as long as we're alive in this world, the body and soul are a team that have to work together. What was our mission when we were sent here? It's part of the greater mission to make this world a home for the holiness of God so that God's presence could be revealed in the world. Right? We were sent here by God to make this place holier, better, improved, repair it. A tikkun olam, make a repair in this world. It means make this world, this physical, sloppy, difficult, challenging world, a fit home for God's presence. So of course we want to crown God king and invite him into our lives and subject our will to his. But how are we going to do that? We have our own needs because we live in a body. So while we don't need to be materialistic about it, it is absolutely okay to pray for the things that you need so that you can be more effective in your mission. And if you're stressed about money all the time, you shouldn't be stressed about money all the time. You should have more money so that it won't be a source of stress. Obviously, some billionaires have all the money in the world and they're still stressed about money. They've lost the plot, right? So you want to get to the idea that all of our needs that we're praying for, and we should pray for them, but it's because we want to be able to use all the arrows in our quiver, all the tools in our belt, all of our being, material, spiritual, thought, emotional, rationality, our relationships, everything pulling together so that we can do the work of our holy mission in this world. And all of that is on the table at Rosh Hashanah. May we have a successful, beautiful, uplifting, davening prayers during Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up so soon. Okay. And no coincidence, because there's no accidents, these pages that we're doing today, tomorrow, the next day, are actually discussing Rosh Hashanah. It really is a coincidence in a sense. It didn't have to be that way. The Daf Yomi cycle is in no way tied to the yearly cycle of holidays, but it worked out that we're discussing Rosh Hashanah just as Rosh Hashanah is coming up. A beautiful little love note from the Lord. That's what accidents are. Okay, where are we? We are on page 4 here in chapter 1 of Tractate Beitzah. We are on page 4 and we're going to pick it up. So generally speaking, we're in the first chapter. We're discussing Mishnah number 1. The Mishnah was about an egg that was laid by a chicken on the festival. And the question is, can we eat it? There are a lot of issues at stake here. It's a very interesting Talmudic discussion that we're in the middle of. And actually, by following this discussion, if you've sort of joined Daf Yomi late, this cycle of Talmud reading, it's a difficult but good place to join in because you're really jumping right into how the sages argue and figure things out. So there's a lot of possibilities of why the ruling is the way that it is, right? So an egg that was laid on a festival day, right? You have a chicken that's laying eggs in your yard. The new egg appeared on, let's say, the first day of Sukkot or Rosh Hashanah for that matter. You can cook on a festival day. You can't do that on Shabbos, but can you eat that egg? Probably not. Probably not, but there's a bunch of different reasons why you can't eat that egg, right? We're getting into that now. All right. It is taught in a Beitzah. Acherim, others, right? Usually this is actually a coded name for Rabbi Meir. Acherim say, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, with regard to an egg laid on a festival, it and its mother may be eaten. The Gemara asks, with what case are we dealing? If we say that this is dealing with a chicken that was designated for food, it is obvious that it and its mother are permitted. The egg and its mother are permitted. Rather, say that this is dealing with a chicken designated for laying eggs. But in that case, it and its mother are both prohibited, right? So this is based on the concept of muktzah. If it was prepared for use on the festival from before the festival, so then it can be used on the festival, right? A chicken that was set aside for food, meaning you were meaning to eat it. Okay, so on the festival day, you could slaughter that chicken, roast it, and eat it, and its egg is included in that permit to do so. But if it was a chicken designated for laying eggs, okay, so that egg didn't exist before the festival. It came into existence on the festival. That's a case of nolad. It's new, just came into existence. So it could not have been prepared for use from before the festival, and therefore it is set aside, and we can't eat it on the festival day. We won't be able to eat it until after the festival day. Rabbi Zera said that the Beitzah should be understood as follows. The egg may be eaten on account of its mother. It's kind of like a nice little shorthand. If it is permitted to eat the chicken, then the egg may also be eaten. And the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances? In which case is it necessary to apply this ruling? And Abaye said it is referring to a case where one bought this chicken without specifying whether he intended to eat it or use it for eggs. Somebody said in the comments the other night, well, not every time is a chicken designated either to be an egg-laying chicken or to be a chicken that's going to be slaughtered and eaten. Sometimes you just have a chicken lying around and you haven't made that designation. So here we're talking about exactly that. So the person bought the chicken. He didn't specify whether it was intended to eat it or use it for its eggs. So in that case, if the chicken was slaughtered on the festival, it has been retroactively clarified that it was intended for food all along, and the eggs that it lays are therefore permitted. If it was not slaughtered, it has been retroactively clarified that it was intended for laying eggs, and the eggs it lays are prohibited. This is based on the concept of retroactive designation, which we've encountered before, and some of the sages hold by it, and some of them don't. And so where that comes up is if you have, like a pile of untithed produce, or a barrel of untithed wine, can you drink it on the festival? You can't drink anything that's untithed, but you could make a proclamation, a statement, and say, okay, well, 10% of this wine, I'm going to set it aside tomorrow as it's tithe, and then you could start drinking it now, and then tomorrow when you put 10% aside for the tithe to give, to the Levium and the priest, 12%, so then you would have had retroactive designation. But some of the sages say you can't do retroactive designation. You can only do it at the time when the designation needs to be done. And the process of tithing is not permitted to be done on Shabbos or the festival, so you could not drink that untithed wine during the festival. That's that issue, generally speaking. Rav Mari said that the phrase, "it and its mother may be eaten," should not be taken literally. Rather, the Tana, the rabbi of the Mishna, is teaching an exaggeration, guzma, for extra emphasis, as it is taught in a different Beitzah. Acherim say in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, an egg may be eaten, it and its mother, and the chick and its shell. This is understood to be an exaggeration because once a chicken hatches, it's a chick, it can be eaten. I mean, who wants to eat like a tiny chick? But you could. But before it hatches, you cannot eat it. So what does it mean, a chick in its shell? The Gemara clarifies, what is the meaning of this addition, its shell? If we say it is referring to an actual shell, is a shell edible? We don't eat eggshells. Rather, the Beitzah must be referring to the consumption of a chick that is still inside its shell. And this explanation is problematic, as the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov only in permitting the eating of a chick immediately after it hatches, when it has already entered the world. However, when it has not yet entered the world, i.e. if the chick is still in its shell, they do not disagree. Even the rabbis accept that this chick has the status of a creeping animal and it may not be eaten. You can't eat this unborn chicken, okay? If it's developing inside the egg, you can't crack open the egg and eat that chick. That's considered a sheretz, a creeping thing, and in fact, it imparts impurity if that indeed is a sheretz. If it's considered a sheretz. And indeed, when we make eggs here, what we will do is crack them open like in a glass, and just to see, is there like one of those little blood spots, like a tiny little red spot on the yolk of an egg. If so, that was a fertilized egg. It's on its way to becoming a chick. So now you brought it out of the shell. That is not kosher. You can't eat an egg that has that red dot in the yolk. Rather, evidently the expression "a chick and its shell" should not be understood literally, as it is an exaggeration. Here too, the phrase "it and its mother may be eaten" is an exaggeration. It does not mean literally that the chick and its mother may be eaten, but is merely a statement of emphasis that the egg is undoubtedly permitted, meaning you bought a chicken, you didn't designate. That's why I call the show today, sometimes a chicken is just a chicken. You didn't say it's a roasting chicken or it's an egg-laying chicken. But it's going to be, it and its egg will be, that it happens to land the festival, are going to be permitted if you then cook the chicken, right? Because then you obviously intended to eat the chicken. Let's continue. At least according to that view. It was stated that Amoraim disputed the following issue. Amoraim are the rabbis of the Gemara, the later rabbis after the Mishnah was published. If Shabbos and a festival occur on consecutive days, Rav said an egg laid on this one is prohibited on that one, and Rabbi Yochanan said an egg laid on this one is permitted on that one. And the Gemara asks, let us say that Rav holds that when Shabbos and a festival occur on consecutive days, it is considered one continuous sanctity, i.e. a single indivisible day, right? So if the egg was laid on Friday, and Friday happened to be a festival day, could you eat it on Shabbos? Now, you can't cook it on Shabbos because there's no cooking on Shabbos, but maybe you could eat it raw. Or if the egg was laid on Shabbos, Could you eat it the next day, which happens to be a festival day when cooking is permitted? Rav says you cannot eat this egg the next day that was laid on the previous day when that day itself was either festival day or Shabbos, and Rabbi Yochanan permits. Where am I? Okay, and so the Gemara says, well, let us say that therefore Rav holds that when Shabbos and a festival occurred on consecutive days, it's like one continuous period of sanctity rather than two separate days of sanctity with separate identities. Is that what Rav is saying? We're examining this question. But didn't Rav say the law is in accordance with the opinion of 4 elders who ruled in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? And Rabbi Eliezer said, when a Shabbos and a festival occur consecutively, there are 2 sanctities rather than 1 long day. Therefore, a joining of Shabbos boundaries need not be placed on a weekday, but may be placed on the first of the holy days to allow going beyond the Shabbos boundary on the second. Evidently, this issue cannot be the basis of their dispute. Rather, here they disagree with regard to Rabbah's preparation, i.e., an item that was prepared on its own from one day to the other, whose use Rabbah prohibits. We're distinguishing Rabbah from Rabbah. We're distinguishing Rav from Rabbah. Rav holds that items prepared by means of Rabbah's preparation are prohibited, whereas Rabbi Yochanan does not hold that items prepared by Rabbah's preparation are prohibited. Rabbah's preparation in this case means no one, prepared that egg that was just laid on Shabbos. God did, right? God allowed that chicken to lay that egg on Shabbos, but now it came into being on that Shabbos, and let's say the festival day is Sunday, so it was prepared for use on the festival day. A person didn't do it. Because if you somehow prepared, if you prepared something, if you folded clothes on Shabbos for use on the next day of the festival, you wouldn't be permitted to use those clothes because you can't prepare on Shabbos for what happens after Shabbos. But in this case, the chicken just did it naturally. So that egg would seem to be prepared for use on the next day. Yes, according to Rabbah, and yes, according to Rabbi Yochanan, no, according to Rav. And the Gemara comments, this dispute is like a dispute between Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishna. An egg laid on Shabbos may be eaten on a festival. If it was laid on a festival, it may be eaten on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, this opinion is not unanimous. Rather, it is still a matter of dispute. As Beis Shammai say, it may be eaten, and Beis Hillel say it may not be eaten. Just as they disagreed about whether an egg is permitted on the day on which it was laid. Okay, what is the halach on this before we go any further? An egg laid on Shabbos is prohibited on a festival that occurs the following Sunday. Likewise, an egg laid on a festival that occurs on a Friday is prohibited on the subsequent Shabbos. So this is in keeping with Beis Hillel and in keeping with maybe eaten... it's in keeping with Beis Shammai say no, Beis Shammai say you can eat that egg, Beis Hillel say you can't. And the law is with Beis Hillel, one of the rare cases where Beis Hillel is more stringent, but we still follow the law of Beis Hillel. The Gemara relates, Rav Ada bar Ahava's host, Ushpizcheni, had these eggs that were laid on a festival that occurred on a Friday, and the host was unsure whether eggs laid on a festival were permitted from the festival for use on Shabbos. And he came before his guest Rav Ada and said to him, what is the law with regard to roasting these eggs now on the festival? Although eating them today is prohibited due to Nolad, they just came into existence today, but let us eat them tomorrow, as they will no longer be prohibited due to Nolad. So the egg was laid on Friday. Could we cook the egg on Friday and then eat it on Saturday when it'll be permitted? And Rav Ada said to him, what is your opinion that led you to pose this question? You evidently assume that in the dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore the egg laid on one day will be permitted on the following day. However, even Rabbi Yochanan permitted one to swallow it only raw on the next day when it is no longer prohibited, but on the same day that it was laid, he did not permit one even to move it and certainly not to roast it. So this egg that was laid on Friday, which is a festival day, okay, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, you could eat it on the next day on Saturday, but only on Saturday can you begin to handle it, because on the day that it was laid, it was new, it's muktzah because of the principle of nolad, it just came into being, so you can't touch it. Certainly you can't cook it. And it is taught likewise in the Beitzah with regard to both an egg that was laid on Shabbos and an egg that was laid on a festival, one may not move it, neither to cover a vessel with it, nor to support the legs of a bed with it. That's a case of exaggeration. Who's going to support the legs of a bed with an egg? But they're just making clear that something which is muktzah, right? The original case of muktzah is like a precision screwdriver. It has no permitted use on Shabbos or a festival because we're not allowed to do those kinds of labor. So not only can you not do the labor that uses that precision screwdriver, you can't even touch the screwdriver. You can't even use the screwdriver for some other use. If you need to move it, you should lift it in an unusual way to make clear that you understand that you're not permitted to touch that screwdriver. And it is taught likewise in a Beitzah with regard to both the egg that was laid on Shabbos and an egg that was laid on a festival, one may not move it, neither to cover a vessel with it nor support the legs of a bed. The Gemara relates a similar incident. This is a similar incident, but with a colorful twist. Rav Papa's host, and some say it was a certain man who came before Rav Papa, had these eggs that were laid on Shabbos that occurred before a festival. And he came before him and said to him, "What is the law with regard to whether it is permitted to eat these eggs tomorrow on the festival?" And Rav Papa said to him, "Go away from me now and come back tomorrow." Why did he say, "Don't ask me this law today, come back to me tomorrow"? Right, now the question is, these eggs were laid on Shabbat that occurred before a festival, which is on Sunday. And he said, what is the law with these eggs? Can I eat it tomorrow? So Rav Papa says, ask me tomorrow. Okay, well, tomorrow is when the question really matters. That's when the eggs would be eaten or not. But why couldn't Rav Papa give an answer now when the person came for the answer? He said this, Rav Papa deferred to give an answer because Rav would not place a disseminator before him to explain his lectures from one festival day until the end of the other, the second festival day. Why? Due to drunkenness. Since it was customary in those times to drink a great deal of wine during festival meals, Rav was concerned that his mind would not be sufficiently clear to issue a public ruling. And Rav Papa was giving the same reason. He's saying, look, you're coming to me with a legal question. You want a halakhic ruling so that you are careful not to violate a Torah prohibition by mistake. So that's why you're asking me this question. Well, what can I tell you? We're having a big festival celebration. I've had several glasses of wine, and I don't trust myself to give you a proper legal ruling. Come back to me tomorrow. When that man came back on the following day, Rav Papa said to him, had I issued a ruling for you then, I would have forgotten the correct response. And I would have said to you, based on the accepted principle, that in the case of a dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, and the eggs would be permitted. However, Rava said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rav with regard to these three issues in connection with the sanctity of festivals and Shabbos, whether his ruling is lenient or whether it is stringent. And this is one of those three cases in which the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rav. So Rav Papa, thank God he was careful not to issue rulings when he had been celebrating and drinking a lot of wine, because he would have just gone to the easy answer, which is, well, in a conflict between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, we follow Rabbi Yochanan, who is an earlier sage, and his rulings would be more authoritative. But on three particular questions, we follow Rav even over the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And this is one of them. Now, let's get the example. Rabbi Yochanan said, with regard to branches that fell from a palm tree on Shabbos, it is prohibited to kindle them on a festival that occurs the next day. And do not reply to me by asking why I permit an egg to be eaten on the following day, but I don't permit these branches that fell from a palm tree on Shabbos to kindle them on the festival, right? So he said, Rabbi Yochanan would say, an egg that's laid on Shabbos, and the next day is Sunday, the festival day, I can eat that egg on Sunday. It came into being on its own, so it was prepared for the festival day. Nobody made a transgression by doing any kind of action to prepare it for the festival day, which they should not have done during Shabbos. God created that egg. But this palm branch that fell off a tree, that also was arranged by God. Nobody pulled it off the tree, it just fell down. So why can't we use it as kindling the next day? And Rabbi Yochanan is going to have a different reason for why he does not permit this palm branch to use it for kindling to start the fire, to do the cooking on the festival day, which is permitted. You can kindle a fire so you can cook on a festival. What is the reason for the distinction between the two cases? In the case of an egg, because on the day of Shabbos itself, it is also fit to be swallowed raw, and nevertheless it is permitted to be eaten only the following day, one knows that an egg is prohibited on the day it was laid. In contrast, with regard to branches, which are not fit for kindling on the day of Shabbos, as kindling a fire is prohibited, if you permit them to kindle the wood on the festival that occurs on the following day, they will mistakenly come to say that on the day that they fell off the tree, they are also permitted. And so you see, he's making a distinct. The egg, people know, they're going to get the idea. What is the policy distinction? You can't eat that egg. Rabbi Yochanan would permit you to eat the egg the next day, because people are going to understand, well, I could have eaten it raw on Shabbos. I mean, it was there. I know I couldn't cook it, but I could have eaten, but I'm not allowed to because it's not prepared for use, but I could use it the next day. Whereas the branches, there's no way you could have done that, use them on Shabbos, since kindling is not permitted. So they might come to make this mistake in the future. They would mistakenly come to say that on the day they fell off the tree, they are also permitted. And as for the reason, right, so they might come to think later when branches fall off a tree on a festival day when kindling is permitted, that they would be able to use them that day, and you're not. And as for the reason the branches are not kindled yesterday when they fell from the tree, it was due only to Shabbos, as they were not fit for kindling then. Rav Matana said, with regard to branches that fell from a palm tree directly into an oven on a festival, okay, so first of all, you certainly can't sever branches to use them as kindling. You can light a fire on a festival. And you can't pick up a branch that fell off that day because it wasn't prepared for use on the festival. So if you know that it fell down that day, you can't use it as part of your kindling to start the fire. What if you have this strange, unlikely circumstance, but now it's an interesting legal question, where a branch fell off a palm tree directly into the oven, where it joins the fire, right? Is it okay to now use this fire that includes this palm branch that was not prepared for use on the festival? So with regard to branches that fell from a palm tree directly into an oven on a festival, one may add to those branches wood prepared from the previous day that didn't just fall off the tree that day, and that may be used for kindling, the wood that was prepared the different day, and he may kindle them all together. And the Gemara asks, but doesn't he turn over and move the prohibited wood that just fell from the tree that day in the course of the cooking process? And the Gemara answers, since most of the wood is permitted, when he turns over permitted wood, as the prohibited part is nullified by the majority. The Gemara challenges this. But doesn't he thereby nullify a prohibited item ab initio by adding permitted wood to the pieces of wood that fell into the oven, which are prohibited? And we learned in a Mishna, one may not nullify a prohibited item ab initio. And the Gemara answers that principle applies only to items prohibited by Torah law. However, with regard to items prohibited by rabbinic law, as in this case involving the prohibition of muktzah, one may nullify the prohibition ab initio. What's going on? If, for example, you're cooking a beef stew and a little tiny piece of cheese fell into it. So now you have a prohibited mixture of dairy and meat, right? Jews can't eat milk and meat together, can't eat dairy and meat together. So this whole beautiful beef stew, which maybe you've been working on for hours, would be ruined, right? Not necessarily. If it's just a tiny piece, less than 1/60th of the volume of that stew, then in most cases, I mean, there's some nuance to this, but in most cases, it would be nullified by the much greater mass of the beef stew, and you would still be able to eat it. There's definitely exceptions to that. If what dropped in is significant, if it changes the flavor, then it's not going to be allowed. But what if the piece of dairy that fell into this pot was not less than 1/60th? It was, let's say, 1/30th of the volume of that beef stew. Could you then add more stew? Maybe you had a second pot of stew. Could you add more stew to this pot and then change that ratio to 1/60th so that it would be nullified? No. That you are not permitted to do, because the prohibition on the mixture of milk and meat is a Torah prohibition. However, if the prohibition in question is a rabbinic prohibition like muktzah, the Torah doesn't say you can't touch that precision screwdriver on Shabbos because it's set aside. The Torah says you can't do any manner of work. You can't touch the screwdriver because the sages put a fence around the Torah and said, just to make sure you don't by mistake pick up that screwdriver and then come to fix your watch with it, which then that would be the prohibited labor of Shabbos. So they're not going to issue a prohibition on a prohibition. And so if somehow, something that was muktzah could be nullified, like in this case, this wood that fell off the tree that day, and it's prohibited to touch it because it wasn't prepared for use on the festival, but now it's going to be in an oven, it fell into the oven by itself, and you need to have it that the majority of the wood in that oven, right, these old-fashioned ovens that were with wood fire, you want to make sure that branch constitutes the minority of the wood that's going to be used for kindling the oven. You could add wood to it because the underlying prohibition is a rabbinic prohibition, not a Torah prohibition. And the Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Rav Ashi, who said any object whose prohibition is temporary, even if the prohibition applies by rabbinic law, it cannot be nullified. What is there to say? This wood is going to be permitted tomorrow. It's just prohibited today because it just fell off the tree today. And we just learned yesterday that temporary prohibitions can't be nullified at all because tomorrow you'll be able to use it. Don't be in such a rush that you need to use it today. Doesn't Rav Ashi agree that it is permitted to kindle the wood after the festival? And the Gemara answers, that principle applies only where the prohibited item remains intact. Here, however, the prohibited item is burned as the wood is turned over when it has already become charcoal. Therefore, one does not perform any action with prohibited items. It's not prohibited in that sense. It was stated that there is a dispute between Amoraim with regard to the law for the 2 festival days observed in the diaspora, right? Remember that the first day of Sukkot, which is coming up, is going to be a 1-day festival in Israel, but it's a 2-day festival outside of Israel. That's the same with all festival days. The first day of Passover is a full festival day, no work, etc. In Israel, outside of Israel, there's the first 2 days of Passover. That's why we have 2 Seders outside of Israel, only 1 Seder in Israel. The exception to that is Rosh Hashanah, which is a unique kind of festival. It is a festival day, but it is a 2-day festival both in Israel and outside of Israel, and we'll be discussing that now. It was stated that there's a dispute between the Amoraim with regard to the halakha for the 2 festival days observed in the diaspora. Rav said an egg that was laid on this day is permitted on that one, and Rav Asi said an egg that was laid on this day is prohibited on that one. An egg that was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, can you eat it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah? Or an egg that was laid on the first day of a festival outside of Israel, could you eat it on the second day of the festival? And the Gemara asks, let us say that Rav Asi holds that the 2 days are one sanctity. But didn't Rav Asi himself recite Havdalah, the prayer of distinction at the end of a holy day from one festival day of the diaspora to the other? And this shows that in his opinion, the first day is the true festival, while the second day is considered a weekday. In earlier generations, they observed the second day of the diaspora because they were unaware when the court sanctified the new moon to mark the beginning of the new month. We've discussed many times. Why is it a 2-day festival outside of Israel? Because in the early days, when the calendar was set by witnesses coming before the Sanhedrin and testifying that they saw the very little sliver of the new moon, which indicates that the new month had begun, and the Sanhedrin said, okay, the new month has begun, and then the word went out, the new month has begun. And until they did that, the new month had not begun. So people who live far away from Jerusalem wouldn't hear in time, not even 2 weeks later when a festival might be beginning. Usually festivals begin at the 2 weeks after the beginning of the month. And even 2 weeks later, they might not have gotten the news what day the month began on. And that's why it was a 2-day festival outside the land of Israel. That no longer is an issue because we have a set calendar. We know years in advance which days, are going to be the first days of Hebrew months. Why do we still have 2-day festivals? Because that was a custom established by the ancients, and we kept it because that's the way that they did it, and that's the way we still do it. Today, that determination is accomplished by means of calculations that are known to all, and the second day is observed as the custom of our fathers, not due to any uncertainty. So the Gemara answers, Rav Asi was uncertain whether the sage's ordinance that the second day is to be observed as a festival was a fixed ordinance that applies even when the calculations determining the new moon are known to all, or whether the ordinance was based strictly on the uncertainty stemming from the lack of awareness outside of Israel of when the new month had begun. Today, when everyone's aware of the beginning of the month, the second day is a weekday, and therefore he acted stringently here, and he prohibited eating an egg on the second day that had been laid on the first day, and he also acted stringently there, and recited Havdalah between the 2 days, because maybe the second day is not really sacred. And Rabbi Zera said, it is reasonable to say, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Asi, that the sages considered the 2 days as one sanctity, and it is not a practice instituted due to uncertainty, as today we know the determination of the first day of the new month based on a fixed calendar, and the precise dates of the festivals are known by all, and nevertheless we observe the 2 days of the observe the 2 festival days of the diaspora. Now this is the rabbis of the Talmud talking about today. This is how we do it when the calendar is known to all. But they're talking like, somewhere between 15 and 1800 years ago. But already the modern practice of knowing what the calendar had come into being. What is the law on this question? An egg laid on the first day of the festival, laid on the first festival day of the diaspora is permitted on the second festival day. And this is in accordance with the opinion of Rav, as the halacha follows his ruling rather than that of his student, Rav Asi. Abaye said, on the contrary, it is reasonable to say in accordance with the opinion of Rav that the second day is observed as a festival due to uncertainty. As we learned in a Mishna, in Rosh Hashanah, which is the next tractate after Beitzah, initially after the court sanctified the new month, they would light torches on the mountaintops from one peak to another to signal that the new moon had been sanctified. If you saw the movie The Lord of the Rings, they would light these signal fires on mountaintops, right, that could be seen from other mountaintops. And when they saw the signal fire on the one mountaintop, they lit the signal fire on that mountaintop, and that was visible to the next mountaintop. And that way you could send the signal really fast, even in the days without internet, telegraph, anything, no electronic communication. They could send the signal hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of miles by these signal fires from mountaintop to mountaintop. But the Samaritans, who didn't submit to the authority of the sages and wanted to confuse the whole system, started lighting bonfires on mountaintops just to screw up the system. And they could no longer use that system. And that's why they initiated to have because of uncertainty, and they couldn't use the signal fire system, that there would just always be 2 days of festival days outside of Israel. After the Samaritans, the Kutim, disrupted this method by lighting torches at the wrong times, the sages instituted that messengers should depart to inform the people of the start of the month. Since the messengers could not reach all diaspora communities before the beginning of the festival 2 weeks later, the sages instituted that an additional festival day should be observed there due to the resultant uncertainty with regard to which day was the actual festival day. Right? What are the 3 pilgrimage festivals? Passover, which begins right on the 15th of Nisan. Sukkot, which begins on the 15th of Tishrei. Shavuos, which is on the 6th of Sivan, but still almost a week after the beginning of the month. The exception to this is Rosh Hashanah. Right? Rosh Hashanah begins on the first day of the month, right? So there was really no time even to get the word about the beginning of the new month, even throughout Israel. And that's why Rosh Hashanah ends up being a 2-day holiday, even in Israel. Abaye continues his argument, and this indicates that if the Samaritans had not interfered, the sages would have restored the earlier custom, and we would observe only one day as the festival, even outside of Israel. And similarly, in a place where the messengers arrived from Jerusalem on time, we observe only one festival day. The Gemara asks, and now that we know the determination of the first day of the new month, because the calendars have all been calculated in advance, what is the reason that we observe 2 festival days in the diaspora? Because the sages sent a warning from the land of Israel, out to the diaspora, saying, although now there is a fixed calendar and there is no uncertainty about which day is the first day of the month and therefore which days are the festival days, be careful to observe the custom of your fathers that you received. Why? Why are we going to maintain this custom of our fathers? Is it just because our fathers did it this way and we're going to continue that? No, there's actually a policy reason. Because at times, the monarchy, meaning the governments that you live under their rule outside in the diaspora, the monarchy will issue decrees of persecution, restricting Torah study, and the fixed calendar may be forgotten. And the people will come to have their proper observance of the festivals disrupted again. However, the fundamental halakha is that the observance of 2 festival days was originally based on uncertainty. It was further stated that the Amoraim discussed a similar problem with regard to the 2 festival days of Rosh Hashanah. Rav and Shmuel both said an egg laid on this day is prohibited on that one, as the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah have a special status. And as I explained before, even, inside the land of Israel, because Rosh Hashanah begins on the first day of the month, they couldn't get the word throughout the land of Israel in time which day they established the month. And so Rosh Hashanah ends up being a 2-day holiday, even in Israel. I'm about to go to comments and questions. Get them in if you have something. I'll just say, what is the law of an egg laid on Rosh Hashanah? An egg laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is prohibited on the second day as well, because these 2 days are considered a single sanctity in accordance with the opinion of both Rav and Shmuel. Okay. Remember that tomorrow it's at 11 a.m. Nina, correct me if I'm wrong, but at 11 a.m. Pacific, we're going to be doing Nina's annual Rosh Hashanah show, her cooking show. She's got some amazing new recipes. She's going to show you how she prepares for Rosh Hashanah. I think she's even got a few spiritual teachings that accompany the cooking. And a new recipe we're very excited about. I can't wait to taste it, called Booze Brisket. I think it's called that because it might have wine and beer in it, but she will explain what it is, why it is, and how to make it. Also, by the way, a word about scheduling coming up. So we'll have a show tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific, the normal time. Rosh Hashanah begins Monday night. I thought about doing a noon show on Monday, but there's just too much to do on the day before we're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah. So tomorrow night will be the last show before Rosh Hashanah. Then we won't have a class on Monday or Tuesday, but we'll get back together Motzi Rosh Hashanah the same way we do tonight, Motzi Shabbos. So Tuesday night after Rosh Hashanah ends, I aim to come live. If something gets in the way of that, then it'll be Wednesday. But I as of now, my plan is, with God's help, to go live, about an hour after Rosh Hashanah ends on Tuesday. Okay, question from Sharon Brooks. I thought the mitzvah was that you can't eat a mother and the egg on the same day. We are to chase the mother away when we take the egg. So that's a different mitzvah, right? That's a different mitzvah. I know that you can't cook a mother and its kid the same day, right? The mammals. But here the question isn't whether you could cook them on the same day. It's whether both are permitted, right? And then you could have your choice of which you're going to eat. Could you cook the chicken and the egg on the same day if the egg was laid that day? That's what we're talking about, right? Because if the egg was laid yesterday, could you cook the chicken and its egg on the same day? I think yes, you can. That's different than the law of the mammal and its offspring. Right, and it's a little bit different question of whether both are permitted according to the laws of muktzah and nolad. And Sharon also says, did they need to use a pre-existing flame to light the fire then as we do now? What a really good question. I don't know. I don't know. And I need to do a little research on this because it seems to me like you would think you can light the flame, right? I mean, because you're going to cook. Cooking then, right now you're supposed to kindle your stove with like a pre-existing flame, right? So people use a yard site candle so that they have a pre-existing flame all through the holiday period when they're going to cook with it. But, why do you need this pre-existing flame? I mean, maybe they took it from a lamp because they would keep a lamp burning all through the festival. So I'm not sure if that law was always the same or if it changed later, and what exactly is the rationale for not lighting it. I guess what it might be is what you're allowed to do is what you need to do in order to cook. But everything that can be done before the festival should be done before the festival. So why kindle a flame if you could have already kindled a flame and kept the flame burning throughout the festival, right? Since we have the option to have a pre-existing flame, that is what we should do rather than do one more, transgression in a sense of what we should not be doing neither on Shabbos nor Yom Tov. But that's just me guessing off the top of my head. I'd have to do some research on that. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got for us tonight. A great way to start this week. Shavua Tov and a good vok to you, and a great way to start a week that contains Rosh Hashanah in it. If for some reason we're not together tomorrow night, if you're not at the class, may you have a good gebenched yar. May you have a Shana Tova. May you have a good, sweet, healthy, joyful, meaningful, prosperous new year. The Hebrew year that's coming up is 5782. All the best.